My name is Marco Herandez. I teach printmaking at Wichita State University. I'm also currently Foundations Coordinator, and I've been at Wichita for, I think, 9 years, almost 9 years now. So yeah, I teach printmaking, but I also consider myself an artist, and I focus on printmaking. So my first experience with printmaking, I took my first printmaking class in undergrad and college. And before that, I had no idea what printmaking was. I took it because I saw an exhibition. It was a faculty exhibition, and one of the printmaking professors had a print, and I thought it was amazing. So I wanted to learn the process. And before that, I liked to draw a lot. So when I took the printmaking class, I felt like I was able to take my drawing ability and use it in printmaking to create really nice prints. So that was my first introduction to it, and I fell in love with the class, so I keep taking printmaking every semester after that. Eventually I graduated and I decided to go to grad school, and I went to K-State. And just pretty much since I took my first printmaking class, I've done it ever since then. A lot of my work is related to my culture and my upbringing. I was born in Mexico, but raised in this country. Some of my prints are completely related to a past memory or an idea that I had when I was younger or from the past. I'll describe a print that I did. So I made a print based on immigration. So I made a print related to our experiences with immigration, coming from a different country, living in this country. So yeah, I think my past experiences definitely influence my work now. Yeah, and I'm always thinking about my past and things that I've gone through, and a lot of times those things come up in my work. A lot of the symbols that come up with my work are some that I've seen a lot or things that are popular. So one of the symbols, as an example, is like the cactus plant, the prickly pear cactus plant, which is a plant that's symbolized in Mexico. Even from Mesoamerican culture, they used it as a food, but also as a medicine. So that's a really popular symbol object that's seen a lot in the Mexican culture. So it's the symbols and the objects that come up in my work are objects that I've seen a lot through when I was a little kid to now. Things that I would see at home, things that I would see at stores, things that I would see on TV, things that are just related from my perspective to my culture. With nostalgia, with some of my current work, I'm using photographs from that my mom gave to me from when I was a kid all the way to now. So when I'm looking at these older photographs, I think about like my family's history in this country and the things that we've gone through. So it happens, I think nostalgia happens a lot when I'm creating and when I'm researching a new work. Just thinking about the things that, yeah, like I said, the history of my family and my history in this country, coming from a different country. I get this question asked a lot, actually, like why do I use these older imagery with like new contemporary imagery? The reason I do that is because I like to show the viewer that I'm interested in all of my history, not just current history of Mexico, but all of it, from past times to contemporary times. So some of my prints have a symbol that's related to Mesoamerican imagery, but then there's also a contemporary figure, a figure that's kind of dressed like me now. So I just like to show the viewer that I'm interested in the whole history of Mexico, not just a specific part. So I use a lot of photography when I'm designing a new print. Some of the photography is images that I've taken myself using my phone or a camera, and sometimes I'll use images from the things that I find online. So I might find like a really interesting photograph that I want to use in a new print. So yeah, it's a big part of the design of my prints. photography, youth photography, found photography, but also photography that I take is really important in my work. So the work here on my right is, these are copper plate etchings. So this is what I consider really delicate, really high detail, really precise. And then this other newer work is monoprints. So these are more abstract, more less delicate, I would say. So I like to do a little bit of both. I would say if I just focus on one of these two processes, I would get bored of it. So I like to change it up every now and then. You know, these prints might take me months to complete. These prints over here might take me a week to complete one or two, just because the process is so different. Not as delicate, not as precise, not as planned out. These probably require a lot more planning and more research than these over here. Like I said, these are etchings over here, copper plate etchings, and then these are monoprints with some lithography aspects to them. So these are like the two processes and techniques that I focus on. Intaglio is the main process on this side over here, and then within the intaglio process, there are techniques, and then etching is one of the techniques in intaglio. It's a really older type of style of making prints. So this is really my main one. I'd say about 70% of my work is copper plate etching, just like this over here. This is a newer process that I learned a couple years ago, and I wanted to start incorporating into my work. Like I mentioned earlier, I think if I just kept doing this type of work, I would get bored, and I was getting bored, and it's really time sensitive, so it would take me a really long time to produce. I would spend months and months just working on one of these, just because the process is so slow and delicate. And with these other ones, I could come into the studio to just work for about a week, and I can finish a couple of them, which is really nice if I have an exhibition like this and I want to show new work. I can just crank out a bunch of these prints for a new show that I have coming up. There are some aspects of these that are somewhat digitally. A lot of the imagery that looks like a photograph are photographs that I took myself. Some of them I found online. And I would make a photocopy on the computer. So using that photocopy, it's like a plate. I'm able to ink up using a lithography process, and I'm able to print the photocopy onto the fine art paper. So everything on here is printed by hand, nothing is digital, but the initial imagery, some of the photographs do start out as a photograph, but then I'm able to print those onto the paper. And then the rest of the color and everything else is hand printed through the monoprint process. Early on, when I started taking art serious, I made it a goal to make sure that I was able to make a connection with my culture through my artwork. And I made that decision because the older I was getting, being raised in this country, I felt like I was starting to lose certain traditions of Mexico. Even the language, I was slowly starting to forget it. Luckily, my mom only speaks Spanish, so whenever I talk to her, I'm able to practice my Spanish with my mom. But certain things I was starting to lose just because I wasn't practicing it as much, because I was living in the Midwest. Maybe I wasn't interacting with people like me or from my culture. So early on, I made it a goal that my work was going to be that bridge, that connection to my culture. So no matter what happens in my life, as long as I keep being an artist, my culture is going to be connected through my artwork. So that's the reason I made that title, is because my art allows me to have that connection no matter what happens. So I know that not everybody is going to be able to relate to my work. It could be someone that has no idea or any idea of what the history of Mexico is or anything about Mexico. So they might come into my exhibition and I might not be able to relate to the work. But I feel like everybody will be able to, at some level, interact with my work or at least appreciate my work. It could either be through the colors, it could be through the delicate process. Maybe they can appreciate that about my work. But someone that doesn't know anything about Mexico, hopefully they become inspired or curious to learn about it through my work. And maybe they can go back home and do some research and find out something new about a different culture that they were inspired to look at through my work. So I mentioned earlier that my language, so interacting with people who maybe don't speak Spanish or are connected to Mexico, I feel that that certain things, certain traditions, the language slowly start to fade away living in this country, especially in the Midwest where maybe there's not a lot of people like me. So I think over the years and the older I get, it is becoming a little bit more difficult. But with my work, I think my work inspires me and makes me research my culture. So that allows me to be connected no matter what I'm doing outside of an artist. My process is not like set in stone. I have different processes when I'm working in the studio. Sometimes I'm just inspired by an image that I see online. It can be through social media, or if I go to a museum, I might be inspired by an artist. And right away I have an idea, this is what I want to do. Other times I think about what is it that I want to do. So an example would be this immigration print. So when I got the idea to make this print, this was a couple years ago when there was a lot of political tension related to immigration. And with my experience, being an immigrant when I was a lot younger, I had the idea to make this immigration print. So when I started to do it, I had to do research. I had to figure out what type of social issues are happening, political issues are happening in this country related to immigration. I talked to my mom about our experiences when I was a lot younger as immigrants. I had to look up images online and in books. And so that was a long process of just the research part of it. And then after I had an idea, I started to sketch out, and I had a bunch of different sketches. Eventually I came with one that I really enjoyed. And then that's when I started to gather all my supplies, my equipment to make the print. So there's a lot that's involved in the process in the studio. And then these other ones are a lot different. These involve just coming into the studio, having imagery. The imagery in these monoprints are actually photographs that I took during my trips to Mexico the last couple of years. So I usually just think about 2 or 3 photographs that might look good together in this print. And then I think about colors and textures. And these types of prints don't involve a lot of research like these other ones do. These are more like just fun, having fun in the studio. These are a lot more serious in my opinion. I think the number one thing is to do the research. So if there's a young artist who wants to make work about their history, their culture, their traditions, if the artist doesn't have a lot of knowledge in that area, I would do a lot of research. The research can come through talking to your family members, to your parents, grandparents, because I did that when I was younger, when I was interested in learning more about who I am and where I came from. But also checking out books related to your culture, your language. And I do think that everybody has culture. It doesn't matter where you're from, what color you are, what language you speak. Everybody has culture. Everybody comes from different parts of the world. So I think that just doing the research, figuring out who you are, where you came from is important. And then another thing that I think it's really important is to look up other artists like you. So other artists who maybe look similar to you or speak the same languages, who have similar interests, and figure out what type of work they're doing and figure out their process. And that's a really good start too, is just being inspired by other artists.